Chapter 1. The Unseen Architects, and Why You Never Hear Them Hammering. Have you ever wondered who really built your world? Not the bricks, not the glass and steel, but the world of your mind, the landscape of what you worry about, what you hope for, what you believe is possible, and what you dismiss as just a foolish dream. What if I told you that the most powerful forces in your life are the ones you are never, ever meant to see? The ones who work in soundproof rooms, whose blueprints are drawn in a language of influence, not law, and whose greatest triumph is that you mistake the walls they've built around your imagination for the horizon itself. This is the first whisper from the philosophy of Noam Chomsky, not as a dry academic, but as a gentle cartographer of the hidden. He asks us to consider the manufacturing of consent. It sounds like a cold industrial term, doesn't it? But feel it for a moment. Manufacturing, something constructed, assembled on a production line with care and precision. And consent, our agreement, our peaceful, willing nod to the way things are. Someone, some intricate, silent machine, is in the business of building our acceptance, crafting our peace. And they are so profoundly good at their job that we swear we arrived at these conclusions all on our own. We feel the weight of our own opinions in our hands and believe we forged them ourselves in the fires of our own reason. We rarely stop to consider who provided the metal, the design, the hammer, and the anvil. Think of it like this. Imagine you are in a vast, beautiful garden. It is the only world you have ever known. The paths are clear and well-trodden, leading to lovely open plazas with fountains. The hedges are high, but not ominously so. They simply guide you gently away from certain areas, suggesting, ever so politely, that there's nothing over there worth seeing anyway. Perhaps just a tool shed, or some untidy land waiting to be cultivated. You walk the paths, you sit by the fountains, and you find yourself in agreement with the garden's design. It is, after all, a very pleasant garden. Your consent for its layout has been manufactured. You never saw the landscape architects who decided where the paths would go. You never heard them discussing which vistas to open up and which to screen off with those tall, leafy walls. You never saw the initial plot of raw, wild, untamed land that existed before the first blueprint was ever drawn. Your world feels natural, inevitable, but it was designed. And the ultimate goal of any designer is to make their work seem so effortless, so innate, that the hand of the artist disappears completely, leaving only the feeling of nature. This is the work of what Chomsky would call the dominant institutions, the great, slow-moving rivers of media, of corporate power, of a political system that answers to investors, not voters. Their power is not primarily held through the barrel of a gun, though that force is always there in the background for emergencies. Its true power is held in its ability to frame the questions, to set the boundaries of respectable debate, to decide what is a serious, mainstream idea and what is a radical fringe notion. It's the subtle art of including certain voices and excluding others, not with a shout, but with a calm editorial shrug. It's presenting two sides of a debate that both exist comfortably within the garden walls, making you feel like you're witnessing a fierce battle of ideas, while never for a moment questioning why the debate is happening inside this particular garden to begin with. And the reason you never hear them hammering, these unseen architects, is because the construction is never done. It is a perpetual background hum, a constant low-frequency vibration that becomes the very atmosphere you breathe. It's the news anchor's tone of concern when discussing a policy that helps the poor, a slight frown that asks, "But is it affordable?" Is it realistic? It's the expert, always ready on standby, who represents a think tank funded by unimaginable wealth, whose job it is to make the interests of the powerful sound like the neutral, objective laws of economics. It's the way a war for resources is always framed as a war for freedom, for democracy, for a noble cause. The language is chosen not to inform, but to pre-digest the world for you, to save you the trouble of chewing on something tough and complicated, to give you a puree of thought, easily swallowed, easily accepted. This is not a conspiracy of villains in a shadowy room. It is something far more ordinary and far more seductive. It is a system, an ecosystem of power. The people within it are not mustache-twirling monsters. They are often good people, smart people, who have been rewarded their entire lives for seeing the world a certain way, for asking certain questions and not others. They have risen to the top of their fields by internalizing the values of the garden's design. They believe in it. They are its most loyal citizens. And so, the manufacturing continues, not with malice, but with a profound, unshakable sense of rightness, of inevitability. And as you drift towards sleep, ask yourself this, not with anxiety, but with a soft, curious wonder. What are the walls in your own mind? What are the hedges that guide you, that you have never thought to push past? What opinions do you hold that feel entirely, uniquely your own, that might, upon closer inspection, bear the faint, almost invisible watermark of a very skilled, very quiet architect? The question isn't meant to frighten you, it is meant to liberate you, because the first step to seeing the walls is to realize that you have been living within them, and the moment you see a wall is the moment you first conceive of the possibility of something, anything, on the other side. And just as that thought settles, like dust motes dancing in a moonbeam, another one drifts in from the periphery. It's a quieter thought, more intimate. It asks not about the world out there, but about the world in here, inside your own skull. If the architects designed the garden, then who wrote the script for the gardener? Chapter 2. The Ghost in Your Choices. The script you're given before you even speak. There is a ghost living in the machine of your mind, a quiet, sophisticated phantom that whispers suggestions into the engine of your choice. You believe with every fiber of your being that you are the captain of your soul, the master of your fate. And you are. But even the most independent captain sails with maps drawn by others, using stars charted by long-dead astronomers. Your freedom is real, but it is a freedom that operates within a predefined arena. Your will is powerful, but it is a will that is presented with a menu of options, all of which have been carefully curated long before you ever walked into the restaurant. This is the second whisper. It's about the limits of our discourse. Chomsky invites us to look at the very language we use, the very concepts we take for granted, not as neutral tools, but as themselves, products of a system. The most ingenious prison is not the one with the highest walls, but the one where the prisoners lovingly polish the bars, believing them to be sacred pillars upholding the roof of their world. We are given a vocabulary for understanding our lives, and that vocabulary itself contains hidden assumptions, silent biases, that shape our reality before we even begin to think about it. Consider the word market. It sounds so natural, doesn't it? A force of nature, like the weather. We speak of market pressures and market solutions as if we are describing the wind and the rain. We are told the market demands cuts to social programs. The market rewards innovation. The market has decided. But a market is not a thing. It is not a force of nature. It is a set of rules. Rules written by people. Rules that can be changed by people. By framing it as an immutable natural force, we are discouraged from ever asking the most basic question: who wrote these rules, and who do they benefit? The language itself does the work of discouraging dissent. To question the market is made to sound as foolish as shaking your fist at a thundercloud. Or think of the term national security, a sacred phrase, an unquestionable altar, before which we must all kneel. Policies are enacted, wars are launched, freedoms are curtailed, all in the name of this hallowed concept. But what does it actually mean? Its definition is fluid, elastic, stretching to cover whatever those in power need it to cover. It is the ultimate conversation ender. To question a national security decision is framed not as dissent, but as treachery. The term itself is a linguistic stop sign, halting thought before it can even begin. It is a ghost, haunting our political language, ensuring certain questions are never seriously asked. This is the script we are given. We believe we are having a free and open debate about how to achieve national security, how to satisfy the market. We argue passionately within the confines of the script, but the playwright is never questioned. The premise of the play is never examined. We are like actors who believe we are improvising, never realizing we are speaking lines that were written for us, on a set designed for us, toward a conclusion that has already been approved. Our choices are real, which word to emphasize, which gesture to use, but the play itself is not ours. This ghost doesn't just live in politics. It lives in the most intimate corners of our lives. It's in the way we talk about our own dreams. We speak of being realistic, a devastatingly powerful phrase. Who defined reality for you? The ghost did. It's in the way we accept a life of quiet desperation, of paying bills and dreaming of vacations, as simply the way it is. It's the script of consumerism, which tells us that freedom is found in the variety of brands we can choose from, that identity is constructed through the things we buy. The choice between this car and that car, this phone and that phone, is presented as a profound exercise of our liberty, a thrilling drama of self-expression. Meanwhile, the choice to reject the entire premise of deriving meaning from consumption, that choice isn't even on the menu. The script doesn't include that scene. But here is where the story turns, and turns gently, toward a profound kind of hope. Because to know that you have been given a script is to instantly become free of it. You might still choose to speak some of the lines. You might find some of them are beautiful, or useful, or true. But now, it is a choice. You are no longer an actor unaware. You are the reader of the script. You can see its structure. You can see where the author tried to manipulate your emotions. You can see the cheap tricks and the lazy writing. And in seeing it, you transcend it. The ghost loses its power the moment you name it. The spell is broken not by a shout, but by a quiet, inward smile of recognition. So tonight, as the darkness holds you, consider the scripts you've been handed. The one about your career. The one about your relationships. The one about what it means to be a good person, a successful person, a free person. Feel the weight of that paper in your hands. You don't have to tear it up in anger. You can simply appreciate it for what it is. A first draft, written by well-meaning but often misguided hands. And you can decide, line by line, which parts to keep, which to revise, and which to cross out entirely, replacing them with lines written in your own true voice. The freedom is not in rebelling against everything, but in consciously, lovingly, choosing what you wish to consent to. And that act of conscious choice is the most revolutionary thing in the world. And from that quiet, personal revolution, a final question emerges. Not from the outside world, not from the scripts of society, but from the very core of your being. It's the oldest question there is. In a world that demands your eyes, your ears, your every waking moment, what will you finally, truly decide to pay attention to? Chapter 3. The Quiet War for Your Attention and the Ancient Weapon You Forgot. We live in an age of noise, a perpetual, shimmering storm of information, entertainment, outrage, and desire. It flashes on the screens in our pockets. It speaks from the speakers in our homes. It clamors for our eyes from every street corner and every silent moment. It is a beautiful, terrifying, exhausting circus, and we are both the audience and the main attraction. We often feel drained, scattered, as if our consciousness is a cup, constantly being bumped, sloshing our precious attention onto the dry, thirsty ground of other people's agendas. This is the final battlefield Chomsky's work points us toward. It's not a battlefield of guns and soldiers, but of neurons and seconds. It is the quiet, relentless war for your attention. Because your attention is the final frontier of control. If you control what a person pays attention to, you control what they think about. If you control what they think about, you control what they care about. And if you control what they care about, you control their actions, their lives, their consent. Your moments of focus are the most valuable currency in the modern world, and they are being extracted from you on an industrial scale. The goal of this system is not to inform you. It is not to educate you. It is to keep you engaged, tuned in, watching, scrolling, clicking. The goal is to capture your waking hours and monetize your consciousness. The news cycle spins not to provide understanding, but to provide a perpetual sense of crisis, of urgency, of fleeting drama that demands you keep watching to see what happens next. Social media platforms are designed not to connect us, but to addict us, to hook us on a drip feed of validation and outrage, each notification a tiny slot machine payoff that keeps us pulling the lever. The entire digital economy is built on the architecture of captured attention. And in this war, our peace of mind is collateral damage. Our ability to think a long, slow, continuous thought is the casualty. Our capacity for deep, uninterrupted connection with another human being, or with a book, or with the silent, patient world of nature is eroded day by day, click by click. We are training our own brains to crave the new, the shiny, the shocking. We are losing the taste for the subtle, the complex, the quiet. We are, in a very real sense, being stolen from ourselves. But, and this is a very quiet, very powerful but, they cannot take what you do not give. This is the ancient weapon you forgot you had. It is not a sword. It is not a shield. It is a choice. The choice to look away. The choice to disconnect. The choice to be bored. The choice to sit in a room with nothing but your own thoughts and dare to find them interesting. This is not a retreat. This is not surrender. It is the most radical act of defiance in a world that demands your constant engagement. It is a strike, a withdrawal of your consent, your attention, your precious life force from their machines. It is the practice of mindfulness, but not just as a personal wellness technique. It is mindfulness as a political act. It is the act of guarding your own attention with the ferocity of a mother guarding her child. It is choosing to read a long book instead of scrolling through a feed of fragments. It is choosing to walk in the woods without documenting it for anyone else. It is choosing to have a conversation where phones are not just put away, but forgotten. It is choosing, for whole hours at a time, to be a human being, not a consumer, not a data point, not an audience member. This is where Chomsky's often daunting analysis of power finds its beautiful, personal, and peaceful conclusion. The ultimate answer to manufactured consent is not to find better information to consume. It is to become a different kind of person. A person who is slow to react, careful to consider, and fiercely protective of their own inner quiet. A person who understands that the first step to changing the world is to stop allowing the world to change you on its terms. It is to reclaim your attention and to direct it, like a beam of light, onto the things that truly, deeply matter to you, onto art, onto love, onto the face of the person across from you, onto the struggle for justice, onto the silent, steadfast wonder of being alive. The architects of the garden depend on you never stopping to look at the walls. The ghost in the script depends on you never reading it critically. The attention merchants depend on you never putting down the device. So your revolution begins in the smallest, quietest moment. It begins the next time your phone buzzes with a notification, and you, instead of reaching for it, simply take a breath. And in that space, between the buzz and the breath, you will have found a territory that is entirely, gloriously your own. You will have won a tiny, silent victory in the quiet war for your soul. And it is in that space, that sacred, silent territory of your own attention, that you can finally, truly rest. The world will still be there in the morning with all its noise and its demands, but you will be different. You will have remembered the weapon you always had, and you will carry that quiet knowledge with you, like a secret flame, for the rest of your days. Now, let go of the world. Let go of the architects and the ghosts and the noise. They have no power here. In this darkness, there is only your breath, the gentle weight of the blanket, the silent, patient beating of your own heart. That is the only thing you need to pay attention to now. That is enough. That is everything. Let it carry you away. Chapter 4. The manufacturing of your yes and the gentle art of your unspoken no. Have you ever wondered where your desires come from? Not the deep, ancient ones. The need for warmth, for connection, for a safe place to rest. No. The other ones. The itch for the new model of a thing you already own. The faint hum of anxiety that you are not keeping up, that you are missing out, that you should want more, better, faster, brighter. What if that itch wasn't yours? What if it was planted there? And what if the most revolutionary act available to a soul in the modern world is the gentle, almost silent art of learning to withhold your consent, to offer your unspoken no? Imagine, if you will, the greatest factory ever built. You cannot see its smokestacks against the sky. You cannot hear the roar of its machinery. It does not produce cars or phones or toys. Its product is far more delicate, far more powerful. Its product is public opinion. It is the very weather of our minds. It manufactures what a great thinker once called consent, the agreed-upon reality. The things we all just seem to know are true, important, necessary. This factory doesn't use force. It doesn't need to. It has a much more elegant and a much more thorough method. It tells stories. It constructs our world not with hammers and nails, but with narratives and images, repeated until they feel like the air itself. Think of the stories we are told over and over, until we stop even hearing them as stories, and simply accept them as the way things are. That happiness lives just on the other side of the next purchase. That our value as people is tied to our productivity, our output, our relentless forward motion. That the world is a frightening place, full of threats that only a great and powerful protector can keep at bay. These are not neutral observations. They are carefully crafted fables, told not around a campfire for wonder, but through a screen for a purpose. Their goal is to make certain ideas seem inevitable, to make certain questions seem unaskable, to make the world they have built seem like the only world possible. And the most brilliant part of this entire silent operation is that it makes you a partner in it. It makes you believe your desires are your own, that your fears are your own, that the constant low-grade hum of wanting and worrying is just the soundtrack of being alive. It convinces you that you are the one running on the treadmill, when in truth, you are also helping to turn the gears that keep it moving for everyone else. Your yes, your agreement to play the game, to seek the rewards it offers, to fear the consequences it warns of, is the engine. Your consent is the fuel. But here in the quiet, we can ask a different question. What happens if we simply stop manufacturing that consent within ourselves? What if the most profound power we have is not the power to shout a new yes, but the power to whisper a very old no? This is not a no of anger. It is not a scream of rebellion. Those are often just another kind of fuel, another form of engagement with the machine. This is quieter, deeper. It is the no of the deep ocean current that moves independently of the frantic waves on the surface. It is the no of choosing silence over noise. It is the no of looking at an advertisement and not feeling a want, but seeing a strange artifact, a plea from a distant kingdom that has no power over you. It is the no of valuing your attention so highly that you refuse to auction it off to the highest bidder. It is the no of sitting with your own boredom, your own stillness, and discovering that the itch fades, and beneath it is a much older, much quieter you. A you that desires simple things, sunlight, a deep breath, a moment of real connection with another person. This no is not a rejection of life. It is a reclamation of it. It is the act of taking back the raw materials of your own mind, your attention, your intention, your longing, and ceasing to hand them over to a factory you never chose to work for. This unspoken no is a form of gentle sabotage. It does not break the machines. It simply unplugs them one by one from your soul. And in that newfound quiet, you might just hear the faint, almost forgotten sound of your own thoughts, your own desires, your own unmanufactured, unconsenting, beautifully ordinary heart. And you realize that your true yes was always waiting underneath, like a seed in the dark, patient and whole, needing only the silence to finally begin to grow. And so, as that thought settles, as you feel the weight of your own quiet power to dissent, a new question begins to form in the stillness. If these stories are so powerful, how are they built? What are the invisible bricks and mortar? The answer lies not in a loudspeaker, but in a whisper. It lives in the very rules we use to make sense of the world, a grammar we all learn, but never see. You can start to listen for the passive voice in the news you hear and ask the simple, childlike question, who did it? You can notice the words that feel cold and dead, like content, and reclaim the warmer, older, truer words, story, art, song, connection. You can feel the absurdity of human capital and remember the profound truth. You are not an asset. You are a soul. This is the quiet work of linguistic resistance. It is not about shouting new slogans. It is about listening to the old silence between the words you've been given. It is about rediscovering the language of the human heart, a grammar not of obedience, but of truth. A grammar that does not hide responsibility, but seeks it. That does not isolate, but connects. That does not commodify, but cherishes. It is the original language, and it is waiting for you to remember it. And from that remembrance, from the rediscovery of a truer tongue, a final calming truth emerges. If this system is so pervasive, so skilled at shaping thought itself, how does change ever happen? It does not happen with a single glorious explosion. It happens like the ocean reclaiming the shore, not with violence, but with a persistent, gentle, inevitable pressure. It happens through a force that is often mistaken for passivity, but is in fact the most powerful and relentless energy in human history. Chapter 5. The Grammar of Obedience. How Power Whispers in the Rules. We never question. Language is our home. It is the water we swim in, the air we breathe. We think we use it to describe the world, but what if it's also using us? What if, hidden within the very structure of our sentences, the words we are given and the ones we are not, there is a silent curriculum, a set of instructions on how to see, what to value, and what to never, ever question. This is the grammar of obedience. It is the way power teaches us to think, by controlling the very tools we use to think with. Consider the passive voice. It is a simple, grammatical construction, but it is also a tool of profound magic. It can make the powerful invisible. Mistakes were made. Who made them? The sentence doesn't say. The responsibility evaporates. The action floats, ghost-like, unattached to any human actor. The decision was taken. By whom? The language shields us from the answer. It creates a world where things just happen. Policies are enacted. Markets fluctuate. Wars begin. It is a world of forces and phenomena, not of choices and people. It is a grammar that anesthetizes us against outrage. We cannot be angry at a phenomenon. We cannot hold a force accountable. This is not an accident. It is a design feature of the language of power. It teaches us a kind of helplessness, a sense that the world is run by vast, impersonal engines that we can never hope to understand or influence. Now consider the words that simply vanish, the concepts that become unsayable. Think of the word class. It has been largely scrubbed from our public vocabulary. We are encouraged to see ourselves not as members of a shared economic reality, but as individual consumers, unique brands, personal projects. To speak of class is to introduce a dangerous idea that our fates might be linked, that the struggle of a worker in a warehouse might be connected to the comfort of an executive in a penthouse. The language is engineered to keep us alone, to keep us competing, to keep us believing that our success or failure is a personal moral achievement or failing, never the result of a structured system. The words we lose are the roads that are closed off on the map of our mind. We stop being able to travel to those places. We forget they ever existed. And then there are the new words that are manufactured and injected into the water supply of our conversation. Content creator, a sterile, flattening term that turns the ancient, sacred human act of storytelling and art-making into the industrial production of a commodity. Human capital, a phrase that transforms living, breathing, loving human beings into assets on a balance sheet to be invested in or written off. These are not neutral terms, they are Trojan horses. They carry inside them a whole worldview, a cold, calculating economic view of human value. When we use these words, even reluctantly, we are subtly trained to see the world through that lens. We start to think of ourselves as content creators. We start to think of our skills as human capital. We begin to process our own lives using the software of the corporation. This is the deep engineering of consent. It happens not through arguments we can dissect, but through the language we cannot avoid. It is a constant, low-frequency vibration that shapes the pottery of our minds while the clay is still soft. We learn the grammar of power as we learn our mother tongue, unconsciously, effortlessly, and completely. It becomes the sound of normalcy, of reality itself. To question it sounds like nonsense, like a kind of madness. It is to crack the very crystal goblet from which we drink the world. But you are questioning it right now in this quiet space. You are hearing the hum. And that is the first and greatest step to breaking its spell. Chapter 6. The Fierce Patience of the Unconquered. What the stillest waters in history can teach us now. We are taught to admire the earthquake, the dramatic rupture, the revolution that is televised, that has a soundtrack and a clear villain and a heroic finale. We are taught that history is made by the loud, the disruptive, the violently decisive. But what if that's just another story the factory tells? What if real, enduring change, the kind that alters the bedrock of society, works in a completely different way? What if it is the work not of the earthquake, but of the water? A slow, patient, persistent drip. Drip, drip, onto the stone of injustice. This is the fierce patience of the unconquered. It is the power of those who refuse to play by the rules of power, who refuse to provide the dramatic confrontation it is so well equipped to win. Think of the civil rights movement. Our simplified story focuses on the marches, the speeches, the dramatic clashes, and these were vital. But they were the surface expression of something much deeper, much slower, and much more powerful. For decades before the marches, there was the patient, unglamorous, exhausting work of community building, of teaching, of organizing, of simply refusing, day after day, to internalize the lie of inferiority. This was a profound act of cognitive resistance. It was the slow, meticulous process of building a new reality within the shell of the old one, a reality based on dignity and worth, long before the outside world was forced to acknowledge it. The marches were the moment the flower broke through the soil, but the growth happened unseen, in the dark, through the relentless patience of the root. This is the model. This is how the grammar of obedience is truly rewritten. Not by inventing a new language all at once, but by speaking the old words with a new, unshakable sincerity over and over, until the world has no choice but to hear their meaning. It is the power of the constant, gentle no we spoke of earlier, applied not just individually, but collectively. It is a form of spiritual aikido, using the energy of the system's expectations against itself by simply refusing to comply with its core premise, that you must be frantic, productive, consuming, and afraid. The system is designed to handle protests. It has protocols for riots. It knows how to spin narratives around elections and debates. It is utterly baffled and disarmed by calm, persistent non-participation, by a people who simply decide to stop believing in the monster under the bed, by a community that turns inward and builds its own gardens, its own schools, its own definitions of success and safety and joy. This is not retreat. It is a strategic redirecting of energy away from the frameworks of power and toward the building of a new world in the quiet corners of the old. This work has no dramatic deadline. It offers no instant gratification. It is the work of a gardener, not a conqueror. It requires a faith, not based on evidence, but on a deeper knowing, a knowing that a seed planted in truth will eventually grow, even if you never get to sit in its shade. It is the understanding that bending the arc of the moral universe toward justice is not the work of a single generation, but the sacred task of everyone. You take your turn, applying pressure. You add your weight to the lever, and you trust that those who come after you will add theirs. This is the final and most calming truth to carry into sleep. You do not have to win the war tonight. You do not have to have the answers. The pressure does not require you to be anxious or frantic. In fact, it requires the opposite. It requires you to be centered, to be still, to be so sure in your own humanity that the manufactured fears and desires of the world begin to seem like what they are: distant shadows on a cave wall. Your contribution to a better world may be as simple as a deep breath tonight, a moment of real peace, a decision to not be afraid. In that stillness, you are withdrawing your consent from the empire of noise. You are practicing the grammar of peace. You are being water, not rock. And water, given enough time, patiently, gently, always wins. So rest. The work is not a sprint. It is a long, slow exhalation. And your breath, your calm, your unconquered sleep is a part of it. Let go. The current knows the way. Chapter 7. The Permission You Never Gave, and the Echo. It leaves in an empty room. Have you ever had the feeling that your life is a room furnished by someone else? That the choices laid out before you, the paths that seemed so clear and inevitable, were arranged long before you ever arrived? That the most important permission slip, the one for your own life, was signed in a handwriting that is not your own? What happens to the soul that never learns to recognize the forgery? It spends its days in a beautifully appointed room, listening for the echo of its own voice, and hearing only the whisper of the architect. Tonight, let's not think about power as a fist. Let's think of it as an AIR, the particular atmosphere of a room, the temperature of a conversation, the invisible, unspoken rules of what can be said, what can be thought, what can even be imagined. True power, the kind that truly rules our world, is not the power that says no. Anyone can say no. A door can say no. A wall can say no. True, enduring power is the power to design the hallway that leads to the door. It is the power to make the wall seem like a natural part of the landscape, a fact of nature, and not a thing that was built by someone for a reason. This is the quietest, most profound magic trick ever performed, to make the human-made seem divine, to make the constructed feel inevitable. And the key to the trick is a phantom permission slip, the illusion that we have already agreed. Think of the stories we are told from the very beginning, not in books necessarily, but in the fabric of things. The story that some must lead and some must follow. The story that the world is a certain way, a competitive, harsh, and zero-sum game, and that to survive within it, you must play by its established rules. We are handed a script, and we are praised when we read our lines well. We are given a map, and we are called wise when we learn to follow its trails. But who wrote the script? Who drew the map? And what ancient, forgotten forests were paved over to make the roads that now seem so permanent? The most brilliant cage is not the one you cannot escape. It is the one you do not perceive as a cage at all. It is the one you learn to call home. It is the room you believe you chose. This is the permission you never gave. Your consent, manufactured for you. Your assent, assumed. It is a whisper that becomes the background hum of your life. It says, "This is just the way it is. This is reality. This is common sense." And in accepting that whisper as truth, we grant a silent, perpetual permission for the world to remain exactly as it is. We grant permission for the giants to walk the earth because we have been persuaded that they are not giants at all, but merely the landscape. We grant permission for the endless invisible war for our attention, for our obedience, for our fear. Because we have been told that it is not a war, but merely the weather, a condition of life, something to be endured, not questioned. But tonight in the quiet, I want you to consider the empty room, the echo. What does your own voice sound like when it is not agreeing, when it is not reacting, when it is not following the script? It can be a frightening thing to hear at first, because that echo is the sound of a permission slip being revoked. It is not the sound of a protest, not yet. It is quieter than that. It is the sound of a question mark forming in the dark. It is the sound of a single, solitary thought that belongs to you, and you alone. It is the smallest, most powerful act of rebellion there is, to stop agreeing for just a moment and to listen for the echo of your own conscience in the beautifully furnished, terribly silent room. There is a space between the stories we are told and the truth we feel in our bones, a silence. And in that silence, something old and untamed begins to stir. Chapter 8. The Myth of the Tamed Giant. On the subtle art of its unbinding. They will tell you the giant is tame. They will point to its chains, its docile posture, the way it has been taught to perform for our entertainment, to power our engines, to guard our gates. They will tell you it is a necessary beast, a part of the machinery of civilization. But have you ever stood near it, in the deep of the night, when the crowds have gone home and the keepers are asleep? Have you ever placed a hand not on its chains, but on its skin? Felt the low subterranean rumble of a heartbeat that was old before the first chains were ever forged? The giant is not tame. It is waiting, and its unbinding does not begin with a key, but with a memory. The giant is us, the public, the population, the multitude. It is the tremendous, sleeping power of people, together. And the great project of those who rule the world is not to fight the giant, but to persuade it of its own tameness, to convince it that its strength is an illusion, that its roar is a mere echo, that its will is best expressed by choosing from a menu of options prepared by its keepers. This is the stable order we are taught to cherish. This is the consent that is so meticulously manufactured. It is the constant, gentle pressure to forget our own collective size, our own collective weight, our own collective voice, to see ourselves not as a giant, but as a collection of isolated individuals, alone in our rooms, listening to echoes we mistake for our own. But a myth is a fragile thing. It requires constant maintenance. It needs to be repeated in the news, acted out in our politics, sung in our advertisements, whispered in our entertainment. It needs us to believe that the giant's chains are, in fact, its own skeleton, that to be free of them would be to collapse into formless chaos. And so we learn to police ourselves. We learn to fear the untamed version of ourselves more than we fear our keepers. We learn to see our own power as a threat. This is the ultimate victory of the architect, to make the prisoner believe the walls are there for his own protection. The unbinding, then, is not an explosion. It is not a shattering of chains in a single glorious moment. That is a fantasy the myth sells us too. The idea that change is always violent, always dramatic, always elsewhere. The real unbinding is much quieter. It is a process of remembering. It is the slow, patient work of feeling for the rumble of that old heartbeat within yourself. It is the moment you look at another person and instead of seeing a stranger, you see a fellow part of the giant, a shared piece of the sleeping whole. It is the recognition that the chains are not made of iron, but of ideas. And ideas can be changed. They can be outgrown. They can be gently laid aside, like a story we once loved but no longer need. The first step in unbinding the giant is to stop believing the myth of its tameness. It is to recognize that the power structures of our world are not permanent features of the universe. They are human creations, and what is made by humans can be unmade by humans. This is not a call to arms. It is a call to awareness, a call to consciousness. It is the decision to stop performing the script of the tamed creature and to begin remembering the rhythm of your own ancient, untamed heart. The giant's power was never in its roar. Its power was always in its breath, the simple, undeniable fact of its existence. And with every breath you take in the dark, you are participating in that quiet, colossal fact. And from that remembering, a question naturally arises. If the ordinary world is a story, then what might the first sentence of a new one sound like? Chapter 9. The Conspiracy of the Ordinary, and the first word of a quieter revolution. What if the most powerful conspiracy is not a secret meeting in a dark room? What if it is not a plot, or a plan, or a hidden doctrine? What if the most effective conspiracy of all is the one we call ordinary life? The daily rhythm, the common sense, the things we do without thinking, the things we accept without question, the stories we tell ourselves to make the world make sense. This is where the world is truly ruled, not in the spectacular moments of crisis and decision, but in the countless, quiet, unremarkable moments of ascent. The conspiracy of the ordinary. And the revolution against it begins not with a shout, but with a whisper, the first word of a different story. Think of the water in which a fish swims. The fish does not think of it as water. It thinks of it as the world. It is the medium of its existence, invisible, omnipresent, unquestioned. Our ordinary life is our water, the constant flow of messages that tell us what to want, who to be, what to fear. The definitions of success and failure that we absorb through our skin, the boundaries of what is considered realistic, reasonable, possible. This is not an accident. It is a cultivated ecosystem, a garden of predictable thoughts and behaviors. And we are both the gardeners and the plants, tending to our own predictability, pruning back our own wild shoots, in service to a design we did not create. To challenge this is not to launch a frontal assault on reality. It is to become, slowly and gently, a heretic of the ordinary. It is to perform a quiet, personal archaeology on your own life. To take a single commonplace thing, a thought you have, a product you buy, a headline you accept, a fear you carry, and to hold it up to the soft light of the moon. To ask it the simplest, most dangerous question. Why? Why do I believe this? Who benefits from me believing this? What would happen if I simply stopped believing it? This is not an act of aggression. It is an act of reclamation. It is the process of taking back the territory of your own mind, inch by quiet inch, from the conspiracy of the ordinary. This is the quieter revolution. It has no leaders, it has no manifesto, it has no designated day of action. It happens in the solitude of a single mind, in the pause between a stimulus and a response. It is the decision to not click the angry headline. It is the choice to step away from the frantic race for status. It is the courage to define success on your own terms, terms that have to do with compassion and connection and quiet dignity. It is the willingness to be called naive for preferring cooperation to competition. It is the strength to be called unrealistic for believing in a world that operates on a logic deeper than profit. These are the first words of the new story. They are small words, simple words, words like enough, words like together, words like why. And as more and more people begin to whisper these words to themselves, the conspiracy of the ordinary begins to lose its power. The water begins to change temperature. The current begins to shift. The ordinary becomes recognized as the constructed thing it always was. And suddenly, it is no longer ordinary at all. It is just one option, one story among many. And a new story, a story based not on manufactured consent, but on genuine human connection, begins to seem not like a fantasy, but like the most common sense of all. The revolution is not something that will be televised. It is something that will be felt first in the deepest, quietest parts of you. A sense of returning to a self you were always meant to be. A feeling of coming home. And it starts right here, in the dark, with a single quiet thought that is truly, completely your own. Now rest. The story is breathing, and it is yours. Chapter 10. The Cathedral of Your Certainty and the First Stone You Were Handed. Have you ever wondered where your convictions come from? Not the ones you fought for, not the ones you bled to earn, but the others, the quiet ones, the ones that feel so much a part of you, you never think to question their architecture. What if I told you that the very ground on which your Cathedral of Certainty stands was chosen for you, long before you ever arrived? That the first stone was placed in your small, trusting hand, and you were told it was yours to build with. What happens to a soul that never walks back through its own mind, never traces the mortar between the stones, never asks who mixed it, and to what recipe? The tragedy is not in believing something, but in never knowing why. Let's just sit with that for a moment. In the quiet of this room, feel the weight of your own knowing, that thing you are sure of, that truth about the world, about how it works, about who the heroes and the villains are. Feel its solidity. It's a comforting weight, isn't it? A cornerstone. Now, I want you to imagine the moment it was given to you. Not in a classroom, not from a book, but in the soft, almost invisible language of a culture. A casual remark from a relative that echoed in the hallway of your childhood. A headline glanced at on a screen. Its font and placement telling you, before you read a single word, what was important and what was not. The plot of a movie you saw once, where the resolution felt so satisfying, so just, that its moral logic became your own. These are the stones. They are handed to us, one by one, and we are praised for building so well. We are told we are smart, we are perceptive, we understand how the world works, and the cathedral grows, spire upon spire, a monument to a consensus we mistake for our own brilliant, original thought. And the architects, They are so very quiet. They don't wear hard hats or carry blueprints we can see. Their work is in the subtle engineering of consent. It is in the framing of a debate before the debate even begins. It is in the careful curation of what is thinkable and what is unthinkable. It is the gentle, relentless steering of the public mind toward a very specific harbor, all while making us feel as if we are the captains of our own ship, the masters of our own fate. We are given a menu, and we are allowed to choose from it. Oh, we argue passionately over the choices. But we rarely, if ever, question who wrote the menu, who owns the restaurant, and why certain dishes will never, ever be listed. We are building our cathedrals with the stones provided, on the land that was allotted, according to a plan we never saw, but somehow seem to know by heart. And the greatest trick this system ever pulled was to convince us that the architecture was ours alone, that the walls we lean against for support were built from our own raw experience, our own untampered truth. But what if, tonight, as the world outside sleeps, we just loosen one stone, just one, not to tear the whole cathedral down, not to leave you exposed to the elements, but to feel it, to turn it over in your mind's hand, to feel its texture, its weight, to wonder where it was quarried, to see the maker's mark, faint and almost worn away. This is not an act of destruction. It is an act of rediscovery. It is the beginning of a truer ownership. Because a belief you have never questioned is not truly yours, it is a tenant in the house of your mind, and you have never asked for its lease. To question is to become the landlord. To inquire is to take possession. And as you drift towards sleep, know that the most profound power you possess is not in defending your fortresses, but in quietly, gently, exploring their foundations. The first stone you were handed does not have to be the cornerstone of your forever. It can simply be a stone. And you are the builder. And so we see that the walls around our minds are often built with borrowed masonry, which makes the silence on the other side of them all the more profound. What happens when the noise of the official story finally fades? What grows in that fertile, untouched quiet? Chapter 11. The Silence. After the propaganda ends, what grows in the cracks of the official story? There is a silence that is heavier than any noise. It is the silence that falls after the parade has passed, after the last triumphant headline has yellowed and faded, after the speech ends, and the echoes of the applause have been swallowed by the empty hall. It is in this silence that the truth, like a stubborn, tenacious weed, begins to grow in the cracks of the official story. And if you listen closely tonight, in the space between your heartbeats, you can almost hear it growing. A tiny green sound against the gray concrete of what you were told to believe. Propaganda is not always a loud, screeching siren. Often it is a hum, a constant low-frequency hum that becomes the background noise of your life. It's in the rhythm of the news cycle, the cadence of a politician's promise, the glossy narrative of a commercial that sells you a world as well as a product. It is a story told so often and with such confidence that it layers over reality like a shellac. It becomes the accepted reality. But all stories end, and when this one does, there is that deafening silence. And into that silence pours everything that was edited out. The unanswered question, the witness who was never called, the document that was never released, the photograph that didn't fit the frame, the contradiction that was smoothed over with a clever praise. They wait. They are patient. They do not shout. They simply exist. And in the silence, they begin to whisper. Think of it as an old, forgotten garden paved over to make a parking lot. For years, the asphalt does its job. It supports the weight of the world. It provides a useful, functional space. It is the official surface. But underneath, the earth remembers. Seeds wait. Roots push slowly, invisibly, against the blackness. And one day, a crack appears. A tiny, almost imperceptible fissure. And through it, a glimpse of green, a defiant, beautiful sliver of a different reality. The reality that was there all along. This is what grows in the cracks of the official story. It is not another argument. It is not counter-propaganda. It is simply life asserting itself. It is the inconvenient fact, the human story that doesn't fit the political narrative, the cost of a war that was measured in dollars on a spreadsheet, but is now seen in the eyes of a child. This is what the hum of propaganda was designed to drown out. But the hum always, always stops. And the silence it leaves behind is the most potent force in the world. It is the space where real understanding takes root. Your mind, in its quietest state, is that fertile crack. Your doubt is that first, brave shoot of green. When you feel unease, dissonance, a sense that the story you're being told is too clean, too simple, too perfectly packaged, that is not a failure of your understanding. That is your humanity pushing up against the asphalt. That is the part of you that still knows how to listen for the silence and for the truth that grows there. So tonight, don't be afraid of the silence after the news ends. Don't rush to fill it with more noise, more distraction. Lie in it. Let it hold you. For it is in this silence that you can hear the world breathing its own unedited truth. A truth that doesn't need to convince anyone. It just is. And in that, it is more powerful than any story ever told. And from that silence, from that crack in the paved-over world, the only thing that can reach back for you is not an answer, but a question, the oldest lifeline there is. Chapter 12. The Lifeline of a Question. How to pull yourself back to shore in a sea of answers. We are drowning in answers. They pour from our screens, they fill our ears, they offer themselves with a certainty that is seductive. To have an answer is to feel safe, to feel anchored, to feel like you belong to the group that shares that answer. But what if the answers are the very thing pulling you out to sea? What if the only way back to the solid shore of your own self is to let go of them, and instead cling to the fragile, humble lifeline of a question? A real question. Not one designed to trap or to win, but one designed to genuinely wonder. Think of the last time you felt truly adrift. Perhaps you read something troubling, saw something that didn't align, felt the cold water of cognitive dissonance around your ankles. What was your instinct? It was probably to search for an answer, to find an expert, an article, a friend who could explain it away, who could give you the correct interpretation, who could hand you a life preserver of certainty. This is what we've been trained to do, to seek answers. But answers are often stopgaps. They are the end of a journey. They close a door. A question. A question is a boat. It is a vessel that carries you. It doesn't promise a destination, but it promises movement. It promises exploration. The most powerful question you can ever ask of any authority, any system, any piece of information that claims to be the truth is the simplest one. Why? And then, after the first why, another, and another, like a child. Not with aggression, but with a genuine, open curiosity. Why is this happening? Who benefits from me believing this? What happens if we look at it from another angle? What are we not being told? This act of questioning is not an act of cynicism. It is the deepest form of optimism. It is a declaration that you believe the truth is out there and that it is worth the effort of navigating toward it, rather than simply accepting the closest, most convenient answer. It is taking the helm of your own mind. Every time you ask a real question, you are pulling on that lifeline. You are drawing yourself an inch closer to shore, away from the riptide of ready-made answers. The shore is not a place of final, absolute truth. The shore is your own ability to think, to discern, to feel what resonates and what rings false. It is your intellectual and moral sovereignty. It is the feeling of sand beneath your feet, the gritty, real, undeniable texture of a truth you have arrived at yourself through the courageous act of wondering. So as you drift now on the edge of sleep, let the answers go. Let them sink into the dark water around you. They were never yours to carry. Feel how much lighter you are, and in your hand instead, take hold of a single beautiful question. It doesn't have to be grand, it can be small, it can be about anything. Hold it, feel its texture. It is not a heavy stone of certainty. It is a seed, a feather, a key. It is your lifeline, and with it, you can never be truly lost. For the question will always light the next step and the next, guiding you not necessarily to a final answer, but back to yourself, back to the one who is asking, back to the quiet, curious, unconquered core of you that knows the journey of understanding is a gentle, endless, and deeply personal voyage, and that the most sacred thing you can do is simply begin to ask.